Welcome, everyone, to the already 19th episode of the Innovation Circle series. It's a pleasure to see you all online, and thank you so much for taking the time to join on this Wednesday afternoon. Today's episode, we're very lucky to have some very special guests and moderators today to join us to talk about the circular economy transition, specifically in the Nordics. So we have Alexander Haneng, Director of Innovation and Sustainability of the Norwegian Federation of Service Industries and Retail Trade, who will be moderating the discussion today. And it's a pleasure, Alexander, to have you here. We met in Helsinki at the Nordic Circular Summit back in November. And we're also very delighted to have Mr. Michel Bajuk, Managing Director of Cradlenet, and also Dr. Marcus Linder, Director of Business Design at Research Institutes of Sweden. Also co-authors of the Circular Economy Outlook 2024 for the Nordics. And you two also, we saw in Helsinki, you held a great presentation about your publication. So we're very much excited to hear from you again, to have this a little bit more informal discussion with you about the insights and findings of your research. And yeah, thank you so much for taking the time. And with that, I will hand over to Alexander for the conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Emanuela, and I'm so excited to be here with Michel and Marcus. And I also like to see the introduction of this report in Helsinki as well. And then now we can do a deep dive into it. And we have prepared some questions, but we also want questions from the audience at the end. And after that, we're also going to have a little bit of a quiz. So it's going to be an exciting hour for all of us. So Michel, Marcus, welcome. Let's start with the biggest question. So you have surveyed over 800 companies in the Nordics for this report, and it all went down into one thing, the CBI, the Circular Business Index number, and the number is 21%. But what does that mean? What is 21%? Is it good? Is it bad?
That's a good question. So the background here is that the majority of all material flows in society is managed by companies, right? So their actions, that will determine the speed of the circular transition. So then we created this Circular Business Index to be a leading indicator, to say something about the future, that enables us to assess the expected scope of efforts in the near to midterm future and with regards to the circular economy. So you could view it basically as a reply to the question, what is the scope of the circular ambitions of the business strategy of Nordic companies on the publicly traded stock exchanges? So it's a sum of about 14,000 data points. It is a calculation of the intensity and the scope of circular strategy efforts among these companies. And it is normalized to a range of 0 to 100%. So what's the takeaway, Michel?
Yeah, so 21% then is the average of all of the surveyed companies in Denmark, Finland, Norway, and Sweden. The variation is between 16% and 25%, and Finland has the high score here in the Nordics at 25%. And while we haven't really been able to establish any statistically significant differences between the companies or between the countries here, the collective whole of the survey and the report and all the other data points strongly suggest that Finland is ahead in many ways.
I don't think anybody's surprised by that. The Finns are good at this, and there's in the forefront when it comes to circular economy. But when you say 20%, it sounds like, for me at least, that there's some room for improvement.
Oh,
if you said, Marcus, this scales from 0 to 100.
Yeah, that's a lot of room for improvement.
Yeah, and how does that compare to the rest of the world, do you think?
We have no idea. because we have only measured it for the Nordics. But we would like to know, of course. So if any of you guys are listening to this have any idea about how to fund or finance either regional or European or even global report, then we are certainly very, very, very interested.
Correct me if I remember wrongly, Michel, but you have done this before, not for the Nordics, but for Sweden. Is that right?
That's right.
And did it improve for Sweden in this period between the Swedish report and this Nordic report?
Okay, so I'll have to perhaps back a little bit historically. So the first survey was made then in 2018, and it was a smaller survey, limited number of questions, and it was directed only at the largest public listed companies. And then this was repeated in a larger scale, more companies in 2021. So there is like a 3-year gap that we have now repeated 2024. But there are certain questions that we can compare all the way back to 2018. And one of those questions is about strategy. And we can clearly see that strategy and awareness on circularity has increased significantly over this period.
Yeah, I think that's very fascinating. And to just quote the report, it says that 79% of the companies you surveyed believe their competitors will develop significant circular capabilities within the next 5 years. So that means that they're not doing this just because for the goodness of their heart, they see it as a competitive advantage. Is that the right conclusion to draw from this?
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
There are many parts of the survey that suggest that this is done for business reasons to gain a competitive advantage. And I think that particular question that you mentioned there is extra good because when you ask companies about good things like the circular economy, there is a risk that they respond too positively in order to make themselves feel good. But if you instead ask what their competitors are doing, the chances are that we will get a slightly more truthful answer. And that answer was very high in this case. So that is both a surprising and a very encouraging result, I think.
So we can decide that, or we can see that there's been some progress, at least in Sweden, at least in some areas. But what do you think going forward then, when you're doing the next report in 3 to 5 years? What are you going to think is going to change, going to be in 3 to 5 years when it comes to circular economy in the Nordics?
Well, we at 20. Well, if we look at the index at 21%, which is quite far off from 100%, and if this is sort of the machinery humming at this low level now, then we really can't expect a whole lot going forward. So the output then is depending on growth, whether companies are accelerating or breaking ambitions. But really, we need to repeat this study once again in the future to be able to get sort of a reading on the trend.
Yeah, I can understand that. But it looks like to me that they are making strategies for circularity, a lot of them. And you see this, as you said, both of you, that this is about competition and competitive advantage, not only about being environmentally friendly. So a lot of companies in your survey have made a strategy, but are they good at implementing this strategy?
No,
what are your findings on that?
Not particularly, no.
No?
No.
Give me some numbers. How bad?
So the awareness, as mentioned earlier, the awareness has increased, and so has the share of companies who claim that they have some level of circularity embedded into their main business strategy, right? And that number is almost at 9 out of 10 companies, 86% across the Nordics. So 9 out of 10 companies claim they have circularity in their business strategy. However, the circular components of that business strategy cover only an average scope of roughly half of the business strategies of the company as a whole. And further down the line, only 4 out of 10 companies, 39% to be exact, in the study, have defined at least one target for at least one circular strategy. Now, this is sort of a minimum measurement, right? One target for at least one circular strategy. So there is a big gap here between what is in the bigger vision and bigger strategy of the company and what is actually being done.
But
but
does it make a difference?
The good news,
Yeah.
the good news is that the awareness is apparently increasing and becoming mainstream, but that has to be translated to action.
Yeah, and does it make a difference if you actually set targets? Like once you have a circular strategy, and you can of course implement the strategy, but does it make any difference if you make some hard targets?
Yes.
Not surprisingly.
In our data, the difference is huge, like much bigger than we expected, I'd say. So it turns out that the probability estimated from our data is that with defined targets, that circular strategy, so different R strategies like reduce or recycle, that strategy is expected to be executed between 50 and 100 times more, depending on how you interpret the answers, compared to the unmeasured or untargeted strategies. So companies with targets who do measure progress, they can be pretty safely assumed to actually execute, or at least say that they execute, because that's what we ask them, if they execute. Whereas companies that have not set targets, you can safely assume that you don't have to ask about whether or not they execute, because they will almost for sure say that they don't execute said circular strategy. It's a very, very strong relationship here. What gets measured really gets managed or gets done. Ideas are easy. Execution is everything.
And now we have proof for it as well in your report. And that might be the biggest advice if someone listening to this or seeing this. If you're working on implementing a circular strategy in your company organization, make measurable targets. Make targets down, then it's more likely that it will actually be executed as well. But what is the drivers for corporations implementing circular strategies, do you think? Or what do you see in the report?
Well, there's a bunch of drivers all over the spectrum, but those who have the highest scores here, there is one in particular who is outdoing all of the other drivers, and that's actually business opportunity. So 61% of surveyed companies perceive business opportunities as the biggest driver. And related to that, on the third place is actually customer pressure at 46%. But interesting, and then you have cost savings at 44%. So these are the 3 out of the 4 top drivers are all about money, right? Customers, business opportunity, cost savings. But the second one, interestingly, is about decreasing GHG emissions, climate emissions. More than half actually, consider that to be one of the key drivers. And that's super interesting because that also means that the awareness has really increased over the years, over the last few years, about the impact and relationship between circularity and emissions. And on the side note, I often argue in different debates about this as being one of the plan Bs for the climate, as circularity is not really embedded into climate plans and those action plans that are nationally and internationally.
Well, that's good news. I think that businesses now see the connection. And I remember the report coming out of the World Bank called Squaring the Circle a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, that showed that 2/3 of global greenhouse gas emissions came from the value chain of materials and from that can be reduced with circular economies. I think that's really great. So those are the drivers. So it's mostly money. It's CO2 emissions. But what are barriers then from implementing these strategies into real life and making business? If they see the business opportunity, they see the profit opportunities, what are the barriers?
Surprisingly or unsurprisingly, they are very related to the drivers. So the most commonly reported driver, so what's stopping the company from doing more on one of the circular strategies that they've said that they are doing, is uncertainty in the business case. The second most common, is interestingly enough, low customer demand. So this happens at the same time as a lot of them are saying that customer pressure is a very common driver. And then the third one is very much aligned with previous research, and that is that they have a problem with their current business model, creating barriers for taking the next step in their circular strategy. So these numbers are slightly lower than the drivers. We got fewer responses regarding the barriers. So the business case is about 4 in 10, and the lacking customer demand or the current business model is about 3 out of 10 companies that have a problem with. So there seems to be a real business innovation driver and challenge here, I dare say.
There's something you want to add, Michel?
Ditto.
Ditto, yeah. So what we can conclude from this is that most companies are stuck in their linear business models. So how can they get unstuck, or why are they stuck?
The specific data that we got does not answer how to get unstuck from a business model lock-in. We focused on circular economy strategies of different kinds. It is important to remember, I think, regarding this question, that the term business models was developed about 25 years ago on the west coast of the US to explain why incumbent or established firms struggle to create new business. So that's the history of the term, especially the Xerox case. And this is really hard, and I think we should be sympathetic to all the big businesses out there that try to change their business model. I think a wonderful case story in that regard is Kodak, where there is well documented that already in the 80s they saw the digitalization coming and they were unable to change their business model, even though the executive team was, fully on board as far as the documents indicate. It is not so easy. So we should expect established companies to struggle to adapt circular business models. But it can be done, and there are a lot of solutions. And of course, I forgot to say, the reason why it is a business model challenge in general is because the circular economy is very much about creating value from things that have already been put into the economy at one point. So then it's about changing the logic for how the company creates value. And that relates back to what a business model is commonly defined to be, the logic of how a company creates and captures and delivers value.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's a lot of history. We always done it this way, and the same with the rules and regulations around that kind of business. It's also very streamlined for the circular economy, for the linear economy. It needs to maybe be changed for a circular economy when it comes to taxation, regulations, and so forth. I hear that from a lot of our members as well, that there's a lot of change needed to be able to be allowed to do a circular business model. So that's probably part of it as well.
With that said, we should stress that regulatory challenges was not a very common barrier. It is for some circular strategies, but it seems to not be the most common barrier.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah,
Michel?
you can add to that. Here we also have some data that is comparable going back historically. Regulatory challenges were scored much higher back in 2018. But that has dropped already in 2021, and now it dropped significantly for 2024.
Well, that is great news. That means that something is happening with the regulations and the framework that they have to do business within. By going back to low customer demand that you mentioned in one of the top barriers for Nordic companies to be circular, to what extent do they include circular requirements in their own purchases?
To a very low extent.
So they say we want our customers to have circular requirements when they buy stuff, but they don't do it themselves. Is that right?
Yeah. So different standards. So obviously, as we have just gone through, and many of the companies feel stuck in their linear business models, or some companies. It's around roughly a third of them. And as said here, one of the most widely indicated obstacles is also a perceived lack of demand. That's also a third of the companies. So customers are perceived as not making or not wanting or not demanding circular requirements. And only 4 out of 10 public listed companies use circular requirements regularly in procurements. That's what we can see in our study. And across the Nordics, companies in Finland clearly outperform their Nordic peers. I mean, they run in circles around us. They have almost double the share of listed companies in Finland compared to Denmark and Norway, who use circular requirements, and 50% more than in Sweden. So that's a lot. However, and this is ironically, only 15% of the companies indicate that they themselves present circular requirements to suppliers in all or most purchases. So regularly, yes, but the scope is not very big. The scope is actually generally very low. Now we don't have a super high resolution for this data, and it's based on super large estimations here. Nevertheless, the estimations we have in the study indicate that the circular requirements that actually are included in purchases for all of the companies cover not more than 16% of the business operations. So that's like what, a seventh or sixth of the economic activity. That's not a whole lot. And even worse, we're going to add insult to injury. 1/5 of the companies only define circular requirements, only use circular requirements for purchases when customers or authorities demand it. Otherwise, they're hands off.
That's interesting.
So this all stands in super stark contrast with 9 out of 10 companies indicating that circular ambitions are to some degree written into their core business strategies, and there is evidently a differing perception of the agency here for self and others. It's like somebody else's problem, sort of. But that is in itself a great opportunity for change, and I think to break out of this catch-22, obviously somebody has to start systematically making circular requirements, and at least to some degree for some of the R strategies, depending on your value chain, depending on what you do, there are always going to be some stuff that is really easy to do here. And shouldn't be hard to implement. So this may be one of those things that offer some action that is rather accessible and easy to accomplish.
So we need a factor to get things started, because we see the businesses have circular strategies. They haven't implemented them yet. They have they're stuck in linear business models. So who can be a instigator here? How about the EU? There's a lot of new regulations from the EU. We have CSRD, the Environmental Reporting Directive. We have the right to repair. There's now even talk about the Circular Economy Act coming in 2026. How do you think this is going to play out? Will it create the demand that's needed for these companies to get started and get unstuck from the linear business model and get into the circular business model to get that demand going? Marcus,
Tough question.
You're smiling.
You want to go, Marcus?
That's a pretty big question. Yeah.
Yeah, but you think like it should be more focused, because like something is easy to do. Like we can do it this way or this way, the linear way or the circular way. We could save some money, but it's unusual. But when there's some demand on us, like if we have to report this as part of CSRD, as part of the EU taxonomy, about the circular economy action plan and so forth, and there are actually coming demands on you can't destroy goods, unsold goods, for instance. Don't you think that will drive up demand?
Yes, that is the short answer. Yes, absolutely. We did ask a little bit about the companies as well, what their expectations were from some of this coming regulation. There are, of course, too many to fit into one survey. And most of them, roughly half, said that it would probably help them improve or extend their circular activities. Roughly the same amount expected it to help them gain competitive advantage, which is, I think, lovely to hear about our previous question then. A quarter or 25% of the companies do expect the improvements to be large or big. And it seems that those that are the most mature in their current circular activities are also often the most positive towards this new rule. So it's a bit complicated. There are differences between different circular strategies and different parts of the Nordics. But I think we do have some indications that if you have gotten started already, now might be a good time to gain some market share due to the coming regulation.
Yeah, and
obviously,
I think
no sure answers here, but I think the data points in that direction.
And I think also, like, Michel.
I'm not sure I want to interrupt you there, but I just wanted to circle back to one of your first questions about competition or follow-up questions. And this was in that same package of questions where we asked the questions on legislation. But one of the key things here, and one of the perhaps biggest findings, is that everybody seem to be so, or a great majority seem to be so in agreement about their outlook on the competition. So when asked about where they think their competitors are going to be in 5 years, 7 out of 10 companies, 69%, expect their competitors to develop significant circular capabilities within the next 5 years. Now, Marcus has already said this, but I just want to repeat this. This is pretty big.
And to build upon that, Michel, I think a lot of companies will feel a pressure, like, oh, we need to change, and that's bad. Like, people don't like change, of course. We have our market share, we have our customers, and then having to change. But I try to tell at least our members that it's a huge opportunity as well. That, it's not only a EU market, it's a EU green circular market that's opening up now, because these requirements are the same for all of Europe, or in the EU. So it's a huge opportunity to expand outside your region, from the Nordics into the rest of Europe and so forth. And to build upon that, how can the Nordics cooperate with other regions like Eastern Europe or Western Balkans when it comes to circular economy?
I have no idea. Do you, Marcus? No. But I guess, yeah. So I guess Nordic companies are generally excellent at international collaboration. They're seldom those who are in the material-related production value chains are pretty global, I guess, in their operations. So ultimately, then it boils down to relevant matches in value and supply chains. And there should be plenty of opportunity for collaborations between companies in Eastern Europe and the Balkans to innovate and offer disruptive services that should be very attractive for all parties involved.
Well, one thing that comes to my mind is high salaries. Like in the Nordics, we have really high salaries. So actually paying someone to repair something is very expensive compared to importing something new. And same with the competency around repairs. Like we don't have cobblers on the street corners as much as we used to 30, 40 years ago. There's not many repair people available. So I think there's a huge opportunity to cooperate when it comes to both the salary, so we can get things fixed cheaper in Eastern Europe, but also having the competency to fix more things. And I think we can't have the full value chain inside each country. I think we need to look at more European global chains also for circular economy. So I think there's a huge opportunity there for the companies to look for it. And a second thing I see is that a lot of when we get to circular business models, which is one of the key factors to crack, we can actually export those circular business model. So we have one example here in Norway that takes fire extinguishers that are now mostly imported from China, and then you have it for 10 years, and after 10 years, there's a best before date on them, and after that you have to do a manual service. And people in Norway, especially with high salaries, don't do that. So what they do is they throw them away, and that's special refuse, and then they buy a new one. But instead, this company has built this machine that can do this automatically. So they put in a used fire extinguisher and will take out all the powder, refurbish it, put the same powder back in, and then resell it in stores so you can get a refurbished one. And they made this machine and the concept, and that can be, that works just as well in Sweden or in Poland or in the Balkans as well. And there's no reason why we can't, export those ideas to other countries when we figure out how to do it.
Cool.
Yes. So I have two more questions before we open for questions from the audience. So please put questions in the chat or raise your hand, and we'll get to them after the next two questions. I'm looking forward to see your insights to this. So after analyzing the Nordics, what main insights do you think other regions could take away from their circular economy transition? What could they learn from the work you've done?
Well, we were talking about this before, me and Michel. I think we've covered most of it. It's important to remember, of course, that every company is unique with its own unique challenges. But if there is one thing to sort of remember and take away, that is, I think, the sort of main finding here, it is that the most common average Nordic company, they are pursuing circular strategies as business opportunities. This might be really challenging for established companies, as we said, because it might become a business model question, which in turn might be an opportunity if there is an economy that's developing faster. So, game on, I guess you could say. And while climate impact and greenhouse gas emissions is also, a top driver there. One thing to really take away, and that I want other regions to sort of view the Nordics as after having read this report, is that this is not only done to be nice. This is viewed as a way to make money.
And in addition to that, I think there's another thing, and we see that from the EU and more, is the resilience part of this. It's not just for making money, but it's also to ensure that we have access to the resources we need in a more destabilized global situation. And also, of course, taking care of the environment so we don't throw away useful stuff like we see a lot of now when it comes to rare earth metals and lithium and so forth. So
Absolutely.
Thank you.
But that part of the discussion is surprisingly silent or low key. Don't hear that a whole lot. At least not around our parts.
Yeah, I see it from Brussels now and the EU when it comes to discussing, especially the Circular Economy Act, that there's more and more focus on that part as well. And we see it from the Norwegian government as well. They see it more as, keeping the resources within the EU boundaries is helpful as well from a resilience point of view. So I think that's interesting. It can be a key driver to help make this transition come true.
We did ask the companies about securing sourcing, because that is one of those things that shows up and creates great stories when we speak to individual firms. It's like, oh, when the war broke out, we realized that we had to rethink the way we source this type of wood, for instance, was one company who said. And there were several stories like that. But statistically speaking, only 1 out of 10 companies do mention securing sourcing as a driver for their circular economy activities. So it's actually the least common driver, at least last year, among the Nordic publicly traded firms out of all the drivers. And that's really surprising.
Yeah, Marcus, and if I remember correctly, the one country that had most of that was Norway. Wasn't that right? That was the most concerned about access. Right. Yeah. Might be because Norway's an EEA member, not a full EU member. I don't know. But with all the talk of tariffs, I think that probably have increased since you did the report. So my final question before we go to the audience questions. What are the keys to success then when it comes to companies wanting to be more circular? What do they need to get in place to actually get moving on this?
Well, I'll offer two of the key success factors or takeaways from the whole study, I guess. So number one, set clear targets for your circular strategies. And this assumes then that this is not greenwashing, we're just doing this for show. It's assuming that public listed companies, when they set targets, it's an act that is deeply embedded high up in the hierarchy of the business operations. So then we could perhaps assume that it's if they set a target, it's for real, it's with a real ambition. And then the connection, as we have seen earlier, between setting targets and not setting targets and execution is order of magnitude of 50 to 100 times higher. So set clear targets and mean it. And number two, apply circular requirements in purchases. At least find the easy ones that should be no-brainers and do it, because that will increase demand and have chain reactions across all of the actors in the value chain.
Well, I guess there's an efficiency of scale as well. As more people demand these services, the cheaper they get, and then you increase demand. So it's getting that flywheel going, I think. It's so important. So that's really good advice, Michel. So set targets and then start asking about circular products yourself, to sum it up.
Yeah.
Cool. We have some questions from the audience, so we're going to go into. I have the first one is from Marty Rowland. Do you want to ask it the question in person, or should I read it, Marty? I guess I can read it. Oh, Marty, go ahead.
Oh yeah. Okay. I didn't know I was going to participate. So my question was, when we say the circular economy, are we only talking about the private economy? Because I think there's a lot of circularity in what we call urban symbiosis. Public services like water and sewer and disposal, parks. So I guess I'll end my first question there.
Yep.
I guess I could answer that. All the claims we've made here are based on data on the publicly traded companies on the 4 main stock exchanges in the capitals of Norway, Denmark, Sweden, and Finland. So we do not cover many of those things that you mentioned that are run by municipalities. But some of those things might be run by stock traded companies. But the claims we have made here today are about the
Okay.
publicly traded companies.
Okay, so it doesn't apply. Okay, thanks.
And you had a second question as well, I think, Marty, when it comes to tax.
Yeah, well, if you did consider urban services like that, it's pretty clear that a land value tax is a perfectly circular type of tax to pay, get the revenue to do the kind of things like proper disposal, recycling, water, because whenever you improve the value of land through infrastructure and putting it back into infrastructure, that only raises the land value. So it's not taking away from capital or labor. But that's it. Thanks.
Yeah. Oh, I will say, in my opinion, yes, I completely agree. But we don't have that's not included in the data in the study that we made. But yes, certainly, I think there will have to be some type of taxed mechanism taxing resources that are extracted from or virgin resources extracted from the earth or the sea or whatever, in order to make it possible to compete for those parts of the process or parts of the value chains where it's really hard. And in effect today, actually, it is much more expensive to reuse or refurbish or recycle some stuff that is super cheap on the market.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that I'm involved in a ASTM effort on circular product design, and the definition of product includes services, so it does rope in the urban kind of things. Okay, thanks.
I guess
Thank
I
you
could
so
report
much.
some findings from there was an interview where one big company claimed that the CBAM, so the border adjustment tax on certain minerals to start with, to even the playing field for manufacturing using iron and other materials, that is a true game changer, and that will really enable some circular initiatives. So we do have some data, I think, in this study that indicates that taxes have a significant role to play for some industries and firms.
And that's the same finding that the World Bank got in the Squaring the Circle report that came out a few years ago, how national states subsidize raw materials, new virgin raw materials, and then double tax or triple tax when you resell them, refurbish them, repair them, and so forth. So that's something we really need to look into to make it an even playing field, as you say, Marcus. We have a question from Ebin. I think he's left us, but he's asked about the EU regulations and how that is a support in building circular economy strategies. And also, is it just greenwashing, or are Nordic SMEs trying to change these questions?
Didn't Marcus sort of cover that in the earlier reply about CSRD and EU taxonomy and the other regulations?
Yep, I think with that. Yeah. When it comes to greenwashing, though, what's your feeling there? Do you think some of the companies that say they are having circular strategies but haven't implemented them, is that greenwashing, or is it just they don't know how to do it? Might be hard to say.
Could also be that they believe that they are doing more than they then realize when we ask more specific questions. It's probably a bit of both.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Please raise your hand or put it in the chat.
Maybe we should emphasize that it's we have not really studied the SMEs except for one chapter in the Swedish version of the report. In the Nordic report, it's only fairly large companies that are traded on the stock exchanges.
That's a good thing you mentioned that. Yes, these are large companies. Well, Emmanuel, I think we're done with the questions for this segment. Should we go to the quiz?
More than happy to. Thank you very much for the questions and responses. So, as many of you know, we have a little game segment to get to know our speakers a little bit better, called two lies and one truth. So that's where we ask our speakers to indicate some statements about themselves, and then as a group, we try and guess which one is the correct one. You can see the statements on the screen, I hope, and we will kick off with Marcus's statements. So the three statements read, I was once the main source referred to for the term circular business models on Wikipedia for many years. The second one, I played in a band published on Spotify and YouTube Music under the name Circling Wolves. And the third is I skied 90 kilometers Vasalop every year together with my wife. We will just discuss it then on this side. So Marcus, please go ahead and tell us which of the statements is true.
It is number one. I presented my thesis that had extensive parts about circular business models in the same year as Ellen MacArthur Foundation started publishing their first reports. And since it was an academic peer-reviewed material, it became the main citation for many years on what circular business models are on Wikipedia.
So quite a bit of fame there, Marcus. That's very impressive. So do you still regularly check on the Wikipedia page if that's still the case?
No. And it was someone else who told me. So, but I do love Wikipedia, and I'm very proud, of course, that somebody thought it was a good academic citation for the term.
Well, congratulations on that. I think that is indeed quite an achievement. So now we will go over to Michel's statements. So I'll just quickly read them out. Some 16 years back, I was a dance instructor for Let's Dance, the Swedish version of Strictly Come Dancing and Dance with the Stars during 2 seasons. The second one is when I was a young journalist, one of my role models, an editor of a magazine, survived a murder attempt, and I went to Mexico to join a collaborative investigation of the drug cartel behind the hit. And the third one is when I was invited to Stanford to lecture on expert networks in 1998, I was offered to join as one of the first 20 employees at Google, to which I politely declined, having completely misunderstood their pitch and business model. And may I say now, Michel, I'm excited about whatever of those statements is true, because they just sound all very, very fantastic. Please do tell us which one is the true statement.
So the true statement is, although I do dance, and I have been to Stanford to lecture on that, and I believe my paths crossed with the founders of Google at that time, the true statement here is number 2.
Okay, maybe would you like to elaborate a little bit on that?
So and the reason I included this is because I've been thinking about this a lot lately. I went there when I was 20-something, full of idealistic purpose and absolutely convinced that the pen is mightier than the sword. But once I was there, in the environment of having to wear bulletproof vests and being protected by combinations of military and police officers and whatnot, it didn't take very long for me to realize the fragility of it. And whether the pen is mightier than the sword kind of depends on, I think, the distance between the pen and the sword, and perhaps how many other pens you have to back you up once the sword hits you. And the reason I've been thinking about this lately is that this dynamic between the pen and the sword is now globally run by algorithms, and who really decide what you see every time you pick up your phone or your flow, wherever it is, and algorithms that are basically controlled by money, ideology, or both on an industrial scale. So I don't know about you guys who are participating in this, but I personally have friends who very smart friends who have fallen for variety of different conspiracy theories and dark anti-democratic sentiment, and one has even one guy even become a flat earther. Can you believe it? And this dynamic scares me absolutely stiff. This is why I'm thinking about that.
It's a very philosophical note to end on, I believe, especially given the ongoing developments and political developments. Thank you very much for sharing that, Michel. It's a very interesting, but also very thought-provoking example. So with that, I think we can close the session today. Thank you very much to you, Michel, to you, Marcus, for joining us and presenting the insights of your work. I'm happy to disseminate the link, or please follow Marcus's handy trick on how to find the resources. And also thank you very much, Alexander, for moderating such an enticing discussion. So we look forward to staying in touch, and we very much look forward to speaking to you again soon, hopefully. So wishing everyone a pleasant afternoon, hopefully a sunny afternoon, and speak soon. Thank you.
Thank you so much.